Hi, everyone. Welcome to F4G Advocacy Media. You're watching the Journey Series podcast. We're on season 4. A couple of episodes in. I'm Mark. I'm a brown man with bald. Well, I was gonna say with bald hair, but I'm bald. I have a black and white beard and a brown and black shirt, and we're in our home office.
And I'm Crystal. Today I'm wearing a pink sweater, knitted sweater, and I have a brown hair, brown eyes. And as Mark said, we're in our home office.
Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Kaare Dehard, who's going to talk to us about his journey and his work in the field of accessibility and inclusion and all that entails. Hi, Kaare.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Crystal. Great to be here with you.
Thank you.
Good having you.
Well, thanks very much. I don't even know what color the stuff is I'm wearing. I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt, rather posh, elegant. It's got a collar. It covers up the tattoo on my left arm because we don't want to offend people who don't like tattoos. And I'm bald. Mark, I'm happy to join your club. And I wear a scruffy beard. And what else can I say? I am visually impaired, completely blind. I have been since birth. I was very fortunate that that's all that occurred with me because I was born 3.5 months too early, or about 3 months too early. I weighed 1 pound, 12 and a half ounces out of the gate. And I always look at my situation as it could have been worse. I went to school. I had two brothers and a sister. I still do, but I don't see them very often because I live about halfway across Canada from them. I live in Ontario. They live in British Columbia, so I don't see them that often as we've grown up. But we do have, we did have those kind of close ties. And I was actually one of the first blind people in the province of British Columbia, where I grew up, to be integrated into the regular school system, which was really interesting because it was a first time event. They came up with some protocols to try and address the situation. And because it was a first run through, it didn't always go completely smoothly, but with a bit of patience and working together, we managed to get me educated and out through the high school system. I then took a a college degree in massage therapy, which I did for a few years. After that, I went into a call center environment because massage is gig oriented. I put out a lot of money in student loans to get the diploma, and it wasn't coming along quickly enough for me. And at that time, I was about to get married, and I was going to be married into a blended family, and we needed income and to show the youngster that people need to work, and work has got its own rewards. So, setting an example, I migrated from the massage therapy, which wasn't earning a lot, and went to a call center training program that they don't offer anymore for disabled folks. And I went in, I became a call center representative in a cable company. And I moved laterally around that company for many years. I started as a cable sales representative. So any billing related concerns, I would answer questions on the phone. I would talk down people who might have been a little bit on the ledge, a little upset about their bill, a little bit upset about service, bring them back into the plane of reasonableness so that we could organize and sort out a situation for them. So a lot of negotiation. And then I moved into technical support for a brief time. And as things changed, um, what happened was some of the things that we wanted to do were no longer accessible. Companies changed their software, they changed their approach. Things became inaccessible. So I spent some time in recruitment, screening, So I was administrative support for recruitment for about a year. And then the rest of the time I spent at that company, I was able to work in various quality control type situations. I first started checking out internet tickets that were sent in to make sure that they were closed for the right reasons. And then I moved into a department which audited Facebook and Twitter conversations, or X conversations as it'd be known now, but they weren't way back then. And then that department kind of moved into getting into what was called a customer sentiment gathering. When a new policy happened, when a new product came out, when a new deal came out, customers would be invited to fill in surveys. And once they filled in those surveys, we kind of look through them and see, was it good? Was it bad? Was it something we could have done? Was it they just didn't like the product? So we were kind of gathering metrics based on various criteria for the customer service department to look back on and say, okay, what can we do next time? COVID hit, and shortly after COVID, they had to make some business decisions. And I ended up, because I was a long-term customer service rep and I was there for 24 years, they look at that and people who could do a similar job for less, retain them. And I was, without prejudice, let go, along with a number of other people. It was one of those business decisions that is made by a lot of companies. So I didn't feel particularly put upon. But while I was there, as special projects, I developed an interest in doing accessibility testing, because every once in a while, as we were doing the sentiment stuff and the Facebook auditing, we were also part of special projects, and we would be tapped on the shoulder as, can you read this Braille and make sure it's legible? Or can you, check out this part of the website and see if it works? So I'd started to develop that taste for that sort of thing. And I sort of wanted a side gig as well. So I contacted, through a friend of mine who knew about them, a company called Fable Tech Labs. And they specialize in finding, their customers' accessibility sore points in software or websites and helping the companies resolve them. You can't really fix something if you don't know exactly what you're looking for to fix. So as a tester, that's what I do. I will go in and I will evaluate the website. They will give me a nice test flow. They will ask us to perform certain things, and there's a few different ways that we test. I'm qualified for 3 right now. One of them is called a compatibility test, and I will go in there and write my findings up. So I'll go in if something doesn't work, or something could, it doesn't show me that it works, but it did, and I'm not getting verbal feedback because I use VoiceOver. I'm a Mac VoiceOver user and an iPhone VoiceOver user, and I can use JAWS as well. But because of that, they need to know what kind of impact that might be having. So this is accessibility only. Is it accessible? Can I actually negotiate the tasks that are being asked of me? And when it isn't negotiable, I will explain why in writing. Another version of this is something along, it's called a self-guided task. And what we'll do then is we will have a facilitator and we'll be guided through the tasks. Okay, so my job here is accessibility and sometimes usability testing or user experience testing. When I do a compatibility test, I use a program that many will probably be familiar with. It's called VoiceOver. It comes shipped with the Mac. I have used JAWS as well, so I'm familiar with that. And I use VoiceOver for Mac as well. Sorry, Mac and the iPhone, iPad, iOS as well. So my job is to really see when somebody puts something together, whether or not it's going to react well with whichever screen reader they're asking me to use. So I'll go in and I'm given a list of instructions. Okay, follow this, do this job, then do that job. And in a compatibility test, I will write down my answers. There's something called a self-guided task where I have a facilitator. I share my screen with Zoom. I go into the application. I also share my audio with VoiceOver or screen reader of choice. And then our customers will get this captured video and be able to listen to and hear and see exactly what's going on with colored commentation from yours truly to see, you know, how this experience affects and how voiceover is behaving or the screen reader behaves with the tasks and how natural that process may be. With a self-guided task, I'm allowed to inject comments with regards to user experience. When I'm doing a compatibility test and writing it, it's purely about accessibility. I don't generally make comments unless I'm asked, and they can have that as an ask. Our customers can ask us to please explain our experience a bit more, and then it opens that up. But in a traditional form, that compatibility test is purely about is it accessible? And I think there's a great distinction, and both need to be addressed.
Right.
If it's accessible but not user friendly, I'm not likely to use it. I can still get things done, and it does work by the book, but it may not be the most pleasant experience. And as a
Right.
consumer, I'm as much interested in that. However, as
Yes.
somebody who's trying to develop something, they might wish to get the accessibility components solid before they work on the user experience, and that's fair too.
Mhm.
Isn't that in essence? I know they're two distinct things, but is it in essence tied together really tightly? Because if someone's not comfortable using something, it's essentially inaccessible, right?
Well, when I look at accessibility, when you use a screen reader to go over a button, does it read the correct label?
Yeah.
When you press that button, does it activate properly, or is there something blocking it accessibility wise? When I'm looking at user experience, I'm looking at how do I feel when I use this? Um, yes, in order for it to be, I believe that in order for the user experience for me to work, it does have to be accessible first.
Mhm.
And then the organization of that accessibility into a pleasant experience. And that just doesn't cover me, but it covers you, it covers Crystal, it covers any human that ever wants to use this, right? If you have a program that works, but you know, you're just not comfortable with it because you do things and they all work, but you know, it's just not a happy experience. It's more about the feel aspect of it, you know, user experiences. And it does have to be accessible first and foremost. Good user experience certainly doesn't hurt the, you know, I like both. I'm greedy and I want the whole thing.
I don't think it's greedy or selfish or any of that. I
Well, especially when I'm paying for it, you know?
exactly, and not only that, but companies don't realize that they're cutting out so many people because they're the ones being greedy and selfish and only making it accessible to a certain market
Yeah.
Well,
where
yeah, I think they don't know a lot of times, Crystal, is they don't know what constitutes accessibility.
right.
Um, you throw a whole bunch of stuff at them. You know, you've got your WCAG rules, right? Very detailed for a web developer, but you know, you've got a huge pile of manual there to read. But
Mhm.
until they understand as people developing, until they understand what kind of impact not having that stuff has on somebody else, until they can empathize a little by being put in somebody else's shoes, I really
Right.
don't think that they even understand that it's a game changer.
It is. I didn't mean I came across wrong. I didn't mean that companies, they don't have that. If they we talk a lot about just how we were told to do certain things certain way, and from the top down leaders and governments and stuff like that. Um, you know, and so nobody really knew to accommodate their website, in the correct way to do it. So people are learning about that. And that's part of what our platform we want it to be, is educating people and empowering people and helping them understand the experiences that we deal with and our audience deals with, and then having those allies on our channel and other disabled people as well.
Right. And you know something, if you build something that is truly universally designed to work with everybody, there's a lot of people in the world, and it's going to get more because people tend to be living longer now. Um, their quality of life is still good, but parts of their bodies are going to fail, whether it's their eyes, their ears, some of their senses are somewhat changed throughout the process of living. You build it well, and you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of loose change on that table ready to, spend it on you.
Right, right. You're not gonna lose those customers and
But
that.
not only that, but the customers that didn't need it are still going to be happier with the product
Yeah,
because it's more
yeah,
well built and properly engineered.
yeah.
There's a whole bunch of ways to win. I like the certain aspects of it because I can start doing my tasks more independently.
Right, right.
And well, Crystal, you saw that on my post, well, on LinkedIn, when I talked about I had a bank site that I went to and I wanted to buy a product, and there
Yeah.
was an invisible checkbox to me,
Mhm.
and I had to turn voiceover off and get my friend to check a box.
Right.
Kind of embarrassing, really. And then I went to get another product a couple of years later, and they'd fixed that.
Mhm.
That's good.
Yeah,
It's good to see forward progress like
yeah, it definitely, it's definitely, encouraging to us to talk to people, and people become more aware and more empathetic to just people in general and their experiences and their needs and stuff like that. And then you're gonna have people who don't care and they're just gonna go about, they never intended for this audience to, you know, be,
Well, that's what we have
be
legal process to back it up, because empathy alone, I don't think, is going to
right.
solve this. Empathy certainly helps once they're kind of directed towards that page. And it's
Mhm.
great to work with people instead of having an adversarial relationship.
Yeah, yeah,
It's always much better if we can work with people, but sometimes the best long-term working relationships start with a introductorily adversarial one.
right.
And it's just one of those sad truths of the world.
Mhm.
yeah, I think a lot of the short-sighted short-sightedness we see um comes from like maybe a small business mentality where like they've been raised in this old school way of thinking and they're biased, they have certain biases, and they don't prioritize, they prioritize the bottom line because that's their immediate need, or that's what they see as their immediate need. And maybe they have the perception that people with disabilities generally don't have the money to spend on whatever they're selling.
Well, that's kind of a self-fulfilling, though. That
Yeah,
is rather a self-fulfilling prophecy, because unless we get an opportunity
yeah,
to
yeah,
demonstrate our value and we're shut out immediately, that becomes very self-fulfilling. because I've been looking for a job for a couple of years. I've got one, but it's gig oriented and it's not something that I have work coming in every day. And I accept that because they told me right up front, this is what we do and this is how we do it. So from the other side of that, what happens is now that I'm part of that community, what will happen is Fable will send out emails when a task needs to be done. They will send out emails and you have to be watching your inbox. And if you're available to do it, you just click on there, log in, and then begin your task, or you set up an appointment to have a facilitator help you. Or there's a third type of interview that I'm qualified for. I don't know, there's probably more that they do, but what I'm qualified for as a tester is called a user interview, in which we directly interface with the vendors. So the people that are asking for Fable help want to talk to the end users of whichever technology they're asking to be tested.
Mm.
Well, that's a good thing, that a hopeful thing. But I mean, there's still lots of companies which aren't there yet.
Mm.
Yeah, and you know what? It's in a way we have to be marketing ourselves because it's kind of to expand on what you were saying earlier, Mark. Sometimes within our very own communities, because we may have had parental biases passed down to us about what we can and can't do. We believe, not me personally, but as a disabled community member, we may believe that we are not able to do this. And I think it's a really complex intermeshed issue. There is some of it that happens in the workplace. There's some of it that happens from traditional family pass it down kind of learning. And it's a really complex and interesting issue to try and solve
Yeah,
because we have to work against our own personal upbringing and biases as well.
Mm. Yeah, and yeah, that internalized ableism is a difficult beast for sure. But it is so encouraging people like you that are, you know, testing the limits and then explaining how it can be better or made more usable friendly for somebody else in the future that has the same, blindness or other disabilities.
Right. I mean, the thing is that I can only qualify myself to talk about the one disability. We've got people all over Fable who use various types of technology. We've got large print. We've got people who use voice control. We've got people who use switches. So we've got folks who use puff and switch sip, puff and sip switches and stuff like that. So we're trying to cover a wide range of disabilities, and I could not operate, a mouth stick or something like that. But we need people, and we have had people sign up to become and have become part of the Fable community who are using these technologies on a daily basis. And it's their life experiences that we want to tap into. So we're looking at all types of uh, modalities of access. So we don't want to forget anybody.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely takes special people to be able to say, here's the issues, and I want to figure out what we need to make it better and for the future.
And at the same time, when they've done a great job, I always try to leave comments in my notes or a verbal praise for the times when they have absolutely nothing for me to report, but they're, doing due diligence by one, getting Fable to help them with a larger process that I'm involved in. And I'm not sure what that process is, but by the time it gets to me, my job is to test it. But I'm very certain that that process is much more involved because they've already designed the flow. They have broken their tests up into different, here's what we need to test.
Yeah.
Maybe they've road mapped this. Okay, let's organize this issue first, get that to a satisfactory level, and then we'll work on the next. You can only choose so much
Yeah.
at a time. And companies need to sometimes roadmap what they're doing so that, they can incorporate new features when they need to. There's all sorts of things going on just besides the accessibility when they're developing software. And it's great to see it when it's part of that whole process.
Yeah.
They're putting that in place, they're getting things going. And even if I can't report that a piece of software is working, I've always tried to encourage people that, what, this is great because it gives us a work list to take back to your developing people and to chew on and to figure out how you would like to try to tackle this. And we're
Right.
still going to be here next time to see if, this needs any more refinement.
Right. And I think it is so important. So, of course, anybody that cares about accessibility, and is starting a new business or is, knows better to just integrate it into from the ground up. And then it's much easier, but think about like the businesses that never knew or were not even aware, that needed to be integrated. And they're having to learn. So, in some ways, it's our responsibility to help people understand why that's important and
Right. It's
how to do
important to be
it.
supportive rather than punitive
Right, right,
whenever possible. I mean, there's always going to be exceptions to every rule where, a great giant corporation is just being stuck in the mud and stubborn, and they just don't want to. And that's where legislation comes in whichever country we're in, to try to uh, provide counter incentives so that they find a new way to think about this. But there are a lot of challenges because IT in the business world is not often like it is at home, where I find something new, I like it, I'll just implement it. You're trying to implement something across a whole entire network, sometimes a very large network. You have to be very careful about what you implement. Also, there was a time when it was very fashionable for companies to develop all of their own in-house software, and they spent a lot of resources and a lot of money on that. So as a return on investment, they've got to get so many years out of that software before they can even think about upgrading beyond basics, a little here, a little there to maybe cover up a security breach, or to add to maybe a new tax table if, say, they were developing an in-house accounting software, just off the top of my head. But by and large, that might not have been accessible because our understanding of accessibility is growing, but it was not there at all times.
yeah,
And it's a small but very important, um, very important thing for us to be grateful and express that gratitude to the,
Yeah.
like you just mentioned, to the companies that do go ahead and try to engage in this process, because everyone needs encouragement from a big corporation to some kid running third base or something, right?
Absolutely. Encouragement is what keeps people positive and keeps them innovative and motivated.
It'll help them, yeah, keep them motivated to continue the work that they're doing. We don't, just like they don't know what we've done as people with disabilities to get to work today or to the table to talk to them. We don't know what they've had to go through in terms of pressure from other people in their workspace or in their industry to tell them accessibility is a waste of time, right? And
Well, Yeah.
that even do this work. So
And
we
there's a
have,
lot of mythology about accessibility too. It's not as bad as it used to be, but there was an old myth, and some people still believe that in order for a website to be accessible, it's got to be absolutely ugly. And that
No.
might have been true in the DOS days, but it certainly has lost its truth,
Yeah,
you know.
for sure.
Uh, whether it was true or not at one time, it certainly is not now. With proper application of labeling and control labeling, and ARIA is available. HTML5 is good like that. ARIA is good. Just learning the rules, how to work with the style sheets.
is that programming language?
ARIA, yeah, it's accessible, rich internet applications, I think.
So
Yeah,
tell
I'm
us
not
more
sure what the
about,
acronym is. I looked it up a couple of times because I was looking into it, but I can't remember now. ARIA.
and so what has been your exposure with it? Tell us more about what it actually does.
I'm not a coder, but it is put into web code. Accessibility rich internet application is what it stands for. And it's supportive to provide things to various devices, as I understand it. I don't have a great understanding of it because I've kind of been more focusing on the testing side of it rather than the development side of it. But there are tools to help developers. You know, they're not just thrown in the dark and said, okay, here you go. There are methods and tools that have been developed for them, so that they're not taking this accessibility journey on their own with absolutely no support.
Anything else?
You know what? So, you have any questions?
We talked before about how, uh, so I talked with another guest, about me being very interested in watching a lot of DEI trainings and stuff like that. And it's very apparent, the ones that are very obviously putting accessibility in there and the ones that aren't. And it's when the people are using language about that they're being diverse, inclusive, and all, everything included together. They need to specify that if it doesn't have inclusion in your, you can't say that. What do you
Yeah, I
think of
think this is somebody not grasping the whole concept.
right?
Somebody in marketing, well, that's a really cool word. Throw that in. You know, we're
Yeah.
inclusive. Well, what does inclusive actually mean to them? Um, you would know more about this than me. Do they even have a standard definition of inclusion?
Uh, yeah, they do. That definitely needs to be
Well, if they don't,
something
they should
that
be, because honestly, people use that word as if it's,
throw it around. Yeah.
yeah, they apply it because it sounds cool in an ad, but it sometimes is not where they're at.
Mhm.
And they use the word inclusion and accessible when it's partially accessible and it's partially inclusive. And if one were to ask somebody about that, they say, well, we're working on it. Okay, fair enough. But do you have a timeline? You know, do you have any specific goals that you're attempting to meet?
Mhm.
Well, you're saying you're working on it, or is that just one of those empty kind of platitudes? If they truly are working on it, I applaud them. If they're truly not, I don't think I'll buy from them.
Right. Right. It's definitely going to make a difference if like for me and personally, if I go to your website and it's a challenge and I can't visually be able to separate whatever you have on your site and it's too colorful or too flashy or whatever,
Right.
then I'm immediately gonna shut it down and go somewhere else. And that's
Exactly. Because it's not suiting to your environment. We always have certain expectations that we want met internally, and it's not a bad thing, believe you me, it's not. But we want a certain experience when we log into a website, or we want one similar enough that we feel familiar and comfortable with it.
right.
And
You've
if anybody is prone to seizures, they're not going to want flashing. If anybody's using a screen reader, they're not going to want a crazily updating timepiece in the middle of the screen telling you every 100th of a second that the clock's been updated either. you know, it's going to really mar the whole experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
and pop-ups can be
Oh,
kind of
goodness.
yeah,
Oh.
kind of a pain sometimes, most times.
Yes.
Yes.
Like all the time.
Um, and another thing we've noticed is that we'll see an article posted about celebrating how some company has become more accessible and inclusive by doing something for, say, one of their physical stores or whatever. But the
Okay.
website we go to view this information on, which is a website put out by the same company, doesn't have any mention of accessibility on their website.
And I really think that it opens people up, and I can see why they might not, because they might not be confident in the accessibility of their website. So they don't really want to be opened up to vulnerabilities. However, when somebody does commit themselves to great acts of accessibility, they should let people know, because I'm more likely to shop where somebody is accessible.
Definitely.
There's a website that I could have gone to get a cell phone, and I went to try to get it, but the the cart was not accessible. So I decided to keep my old iPhone 10R, as scabby and old dated as it is, because I'd rather not pay $50 for a call-in fee, for an activation fee, and I'd rather not argue with somebody about paying $50 for an activation fee that I should not have to pay because this is not accessible to me. So I'd rather just run my old hardware into the ground until it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, sometimes you can get benefits from doing it that way because, while other people have abandoned um older software, us people who are willing to stick with the older version sometimes find new ways of doing things that people that don't couldn't be bothered to learn.
As long as they keep doing the security updates, I will keep, my old hardware. I'm not sold on 5G yet because it hasn't been fully, completely deployed across Canada, and it might not be for another year because that's a great big undertaking. Can't blame any of the cellular companies for that. It's just a huge country and it's a lot of stuff to install.
Yeah.
So until the 5G network is completely built out, I won't even think about it. Um, so I'm happy with what I've got. It's still getting security updates. I'll stop using my old heap when I can no longer get security updates and it becomes vulnerable. But
Yeah.
I'm cheap. I got short hands and deep pockets.
That's another kind of a minor pet peeve, how some companies have gotten onto this trend of, well, we'll just we'll just stop supporting like our software on older hardware to sort of force people to buy newer things.
They do that sometimes, but sometimes the older hardware is just no longer supportable. It's kind of a mix. The way that they support, like I can see Mac eventually doing this because they switched over from the Intel chips to the M chips. So their own manufacturer, it's an ARM chip, very different. After a while, they're probably not going to want to support the Intel stuff because it's quite different how it's written. And I can get that. But yeah, I can see your side of it too, you know. You got some crusty old hardware, it's worked forever, and now they're not supporting it. It kind of it causes some consternation, shall we say.
Yeah. It it it's kind of like the subscription model that a lot of software has gone to where they just nobody actually like owns software anymore like we used to back when we were younger. You have to subscribe to some cloud service and
Yeah, back when we were young, Sonny.
you just pay for it forever.
Well, in a way, we sort of did that. I mean, ownership of software was sort of an illusion because we got a hard copy of it, but it was still a licensing agreement. I
Yeah.
mean, I felt better about it because I got the illusion of owning something, which was the hard disk, the disc that it came on, or the CD that it came on. But if you pull it apart, it was still just a licensing agreement, and then you had to buy it again when new features came out. So I mean, they've just taken the blinders off of us. I mean, it's the same stuff, but we're not treated to the unreality because now we are actually licensing it like a license rather than having the illusion of the ownership,
Yeah.
which is sad to me because I liked having my illusions.
Yeah. I don't know. It can be seen as like um sad, but it can also be seen as positive because we have less to like
Oh yeah, less shipping, less landfill, more access, quicker to updates. There's all kinds of positives as well, but
yeah,
you know,
sure. And then we were talking about the upgrading of devices for specifically disabled people that maybe find a program that works for them or it's accessible and they can do their job or whatever. And then all of a sudden it goes obsolete and they have to find something new. It just becomes a situation of, a frustration.
absolutely,
And that's,
absolutely.
yeah, so I back to getting companies to integrate into their products from the ground up, then that's not an issue because it's already there from the get-go.
Yeah, I remember one time having a sort of a conversation with somebody about something very similar to that. Um, because back in the day when you wanted a talking cell phone a long time ago, you had to buy one of two programs. And these programs were Talks and Mobile Speak. And I was a Talks user, and you could only run them on certain cell phones.
No, oh, those were for cell phones. So Dragon was for
Oh, Dragon was for forever. Dragon has got a long-standing relationship with people. Yeah, Dragon was the speech, the text-to-speech stuff that you could use and manipulate the computer with voice.
that's what I use it,
Yeah, and
yeah.
Dragon has been a long. Dragon is the granddaddy of all of that type of software, I think. because I remember it being out in the mid 80s.
Yes. And
It's
then
it's
into the end of the 90s.
mhm.
Actually, I used it until like 2004.
So what happens now? What, do you have different software now that you use for that, Crystal?
I don't really need it anymore. We talked a little bit about that before, um, because of my progression and stuff like that, and then us moving into working from home. The environment we're in is not the same, so we can kind
Right.
of control what input we're getting. So
Well,
I'm
that's
not,
always a good thing.
uh, yeah, so I'm not constantly having to uh, filter out stuff and to comprehend what I'm seeing and stuff like that.
Well, that's always good. I mean, I've always been a fan of remote work.
Mhm.
I started working remotely in 2014. It's got its disadvantage as well. Right now, I'm visiting somebody, so we had to make arrangements for me to have access to you know, to a private area to do the podcast today. And that's because, it's not my home. I don't have my home office there with all of my cool Rush album covers up. So I can't draw inspiration from the gods of rock and roll.
No, darn.
But I do have my drum kit one of my drum kits over in the corner there. So I guess I can still tap into some of it.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, do you have anything that you want to talk about or promote, or let us know where people can get a hold of you?
Well, I can be reached on LinkedIn. I do have a LinkedIn profile. And also, if there are anybody who is looking to begin for their company, for their software, for their website, access to getting started with the journey of accessibility, because there's a lot of complexities and you don't need to do it alone. I would recommend visiting the site for the place where I work, which is makeitfable.com. And they have all sorts of case studies that a company can take a look into, to show why this is so valuable from a more strategic point of view. For us, it's valuable because it gives us independence. For a company, there has to be some fiscal and some strategic value in being accessible. And the fact that you're serving customers that may be underserved might be that. But they do have some case studies. They have ways for you to contact people to see what the process is. And who knows, maybe one of these days I might be one of your testers.
Yeah. I remember doing research on you and Babel, and I remember the first part of it. It's I am able fable. Did you say?
It's Make It Fable.
Make it people. So when I was doing that, I was looking up I am able, and I didn't realize it had the F in there. So I could not figure out for the life of me what I was doing wrong. And I had to go back to your LinkedIn page and figure I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive site. I usually check into the tester's dashboard, which is not available um, publicly. But the first time I ever logged into Fable, I just thought, wow, they really got their stuff together, because that's where I did my application, was off the
Yeah,
site that the
that's
public has
awesome.
access to.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I filled in an application, I was sitting at my buddy's cottage, sitting in the sunshine, um, sipping on an adult beverage and madly typing with one hand on my iPhone, trying to get that in there.
So, along with reaching out to you, what about Fable? Are they looking for other people to test products to help?
I am not sure what the status is on that. I know that when I was a tester, because there seems to be a lot of screen reader users that want to get engaged in this.
Yeah.
For whatever somebody else is using, I don't know what the status is. I know I had to wait about 1.5 to 2 years just because, there was a large amount of screen reader testers at one time, and they, every once in a while they need more, right? So I just put in my application. When I did lose my job, I actually put in another one because when and how I was available had changed. So I wanted to update them.
Mhm.
And then shortly after that, I got the nod. So depending on what their needs are, their business needs for who they need to test, there's got, like I said, large print, voice control, things like Dragon, switch systems,
Were,
head sticks, everything like that they test.
were you also involved in Euphonia project with the Google?
I
I
did sign
was
up
in
for,
there. Yeah.
I signed up as a Google user experience tester.
Mhm.
And every once in a while something comes through, but not everything that comes through I can use because some of it, I mean, it's a generalized list.
Right, right, right.
And I'm not one of their trusted testers. I'm just in the user experience group.
Uh, I was pretty impressed by not only it was it accessible to me, but I'm making it and test them wanting to test out how people hear, like Alexa or whatever, not, I mean, not Alexa, that's Amazon, but who does Google?
Oh, the Google Nest?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, Google
I'm
Nest
sorry.
rocks.
Yeah, so I just um, so yeah, it was amazing how they were able to take a bunch of disabled people and the way they talk and the way they move and the way they do things and then integrate that into user experiences for people
Wow,
to.
that's is good because we all have a responsibility to express ourselves, but we're all very uniquely different. So we do express ourselves differently, and that has to be captured for
Yes,
sure.
yes.
So this was a great conversation that we had, Corey. And
Well, thank you very much.
thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me, guys.
Hey, have a great day.
You have a good
You too.
evening.
You too. Take care. Good night.